Madagascar is really one of those islands that captures the imagination. It used to house gigantic flora and fauna, strange civilizations, and a people partly descended from Austronesians who moved across the ocean in simple canoes. In the early 18th century, a legend existed of Madagascar being home to a pirate utopia, Libertalia or Libertatia. Founded by Captain Misson and the priest Caraccioli, it was a place where men could live free, regardless of creed or color. They flew a white flag with the motto Deo a Libertate, God and Liberty, and abolished slavery decades before the European powers. Libertalia has no basis in reality. It stems from the highly allegorical A General History of the Pirates, and seems to have been a thought experiment in discussing Enlightenment ideals. That isn't to say that pirates didn't infest Madagascar. It all begins with what the Libertalians allegedly sought to abolish: slavery. The American colonies were starved for them, but could only be supplied by the monopoly of the Royal African Company. Legally, at least. Illegally, slave smugglers filled in the gaps created by the MAD. The company controlled the trade in West Africa, and the interlopers began to look elsewhere. They realized that Madagascar was under the jurisdiction of the East India Company, who did not trade in slaves. Instead, the natives of Madagascar, the Malagasy, were embroiled in near constant warfare, and had a huge demand for European weapons and mercenaries to get one up over their rivals. The primary plunder taken by the Malagasy were cattle and prisoners of war, slaves. The interlopers could purchase them cheaply in return for weaponry, ammunition, and other semi-industrial products. Meanwhile in the Caribbean, the old buccaneers were running out of safe ports to conduct their piracy. With an increased naval presence and regulation on privateering, it was becoming difficult for them to ply their trade, especially those who were religiously motivated to fight against Catholic Spain. Rumors of an Eastern Ocean, ripe with wealthy heathen ships and an island friendly to pirates, became very appealing. Driven on by New England preachers condemning the Islamic religion of Arabia and the Mughal Empire, the buccaneers set sail. Madagascar was swiftly made a pirate nest, from which the scoundrels could attack pilgrim ships traveling by the Red Sea to Mecca, hence the pirates' name, the Red Sea Men. Having taken their prizes, they had carried back to Madagascar, and then back to America. Madagascar is huge, and they had bases essentially everywhere. Most notable was the island of St. Mary. It can hardly be believed that the small, tranquil island of St. Mary was ever the hotspot of international piracy. That the idyllic scenery was once perverted by the noisome debauchery and brutalities of the Red Sea Men, returning from their successful expeditions. Music, gunfire, laughter, the barking of dogs, screams of love and pain. Deep into the pitch-black night, countless fires would have cast their embers into the star-speckled sky. Geographically speaking, St. Mary is a long and slender island situated on the northeastern coast of Madagascar. The eastern coast of St. Mary lies exposed to the Great Indian Ocean, whereas the western one is shielded by the mainland. It is on this protected coastline that a section caves inwards to form a circular lagoon, protected by a narrow and easily fortified entrance. In the middle lies an islet still called L'Île Faubon, Pirates Island. All of these features made St. Mary excellent as a naval base. Natural windbreaks made the western coast and lagoon absolutely perfect for anchoring ships, beaching, and repairing them. The lagoon was highly defensible against naval assaults. There were plenty of provisions to be had for hungry sailors, the fertile vicinity providing meat, fish, vegetables, and fruit. The diet of the Red Sea Men would have been more colorful than what popular imagination envisions to be the diet of pirates, at least on land. Yet, for so long, St. Mary went unnoticed. That was until 1690, when Adam Baldridge, made landfall. Baldridge is a fascinating and unscrupulous figure. It is said that in 1685 he murdered one of his comrades during a bar fight in Jamaica. He joined a pirate ship, either cruising the Caribbean, South Sea, or perhaps the Indian Ocean. How true his backstory is, we cannot know for certain, but Baldridge must have had some experience, as he certainly proved to be a skilled tactician and a ruthless entrepreneur. By 1690, he had ended up in New York, where he found employment under one Frederick Phillips, a Dutchman who had emigrated to the city in his youth. He would soon become its wealthiest citizen. Phillips and his brother had previously made dealings with pirates, but it's uncertain whether they approached Baldridge or the other way around. The idea was that by setting up a middleman to act as a medium between the traders and the Malagasy, the process of trade and interaction could be made more efficient. He must certainly have caught wind of the profits made by New York slavers and pirates traveling to Madagascar, and realized how he could earn a cut by setting up a trading post on the island. By having an agent to act as the middleman between the pirates, slavers, and Malagasy, the process would be made quicker for everyone. It crucially provided pirates with a safe place to stay during the monsoon season, which prevented them from going out and sailing. It also allowed them to stay in the region for longer, with hopes of getting more and better prices, and also an opportunity to buy manufactured goods, including liquor, clothing, and Bibles. These pirates were very religious. Baldridge arrived on St. Mary on the 17th of July, 1690. Most of his associates died or abandoned him, apart from his young apprentice, John King. Baldridge and King joined the local Malagasy as mercenaries, earning them a starting capital of 70 heads of cattle and a number of slaves. Using them as labor, he constructed himself a house on a hill overlooking the harbor. Here he was approached by several Malagasy, whom he allied by helping them rescue their wives and children from a rival clan. To facilitate this alliance, he married a local woman. However, the alliance was not on equal footing, and Baldridge never assimilated into Malagasy society. By 1696, he had constructed a small fort around his home, segregating himself with a battery of 14 cannon. In 1699, Baldridge wrote a deposition detailing his settling of St. Mary and at least some of the transactions he made. Let's take a look. His first customer arrived on the 13th of October, 1691. The pirate ship Bachelor's Delight, commanded by George Rayner. They had recently taken a Mughal ship and doled out about £1,100 per man. A sizable fortune. While careening their ship, Baldridge supplied them with cattle in return for beads, flour, iron, shot, and powder, and 5 cannons with which to fortify his growing stockade. They stayed for about a month. The next year arrived the Nassau, commanded by Edward Coates. They too had taken a prize, with every man earning a share of £500. Whilst they careened, he supplied them with cattle, and the Malagasy gave them chicken, rice, and yams. In return, he got gunpowder, 6 cannons, spikes, nails, and flour. In August of 1693 arrived a ship owned by Frederick Phillips, Baldridge's employer, containing goods for Baldridge to sell to the pirates. These consisted of 44 pairs of shoes and pumps, 3 dozen stockings, 3 dozen speckled shirts and breeches, 12 hats, carpenter's tools, 5 barrels of rum, 2 grindstones, 3 saws, 3 jars of oil, 2 small iron pots, several books, catechisms, primers, and hornbooks, 2 Bibles, garden seeds, and 3 dozen hoes, the gardening tool. Most of these items were necessities either needed by the pirates or the colony. In return, Baldridge gave them 1,100 pieces of 8, 34 slaves, 15 heads of cattle, and 57 bars of iron. The ship stayed for 2 months. On the 19th of October arrived the Amity, commanded by Thomas Tew. He had recently taken his first prize in the Red Sea, every fellow earning a share of £1,200. They bought most of the provisions from the Malagasy, but Baldridge sold them cattle, and several of the American goods brought in by Phillips. The Amity stayed for almost a month. On the 6th of August, 1695, arrived the charming Mary from Barbados, commanded by Richard Glover. Baldridge bought most of their goods. In December of the same year, he sold these goods to the pirate crew of the Susanna, one of the ships which had accompanied Henry Every, a famous pirate. The Susanna stayed until April, and while they were relaxing, the Amity showed up again, Thomas II having now been killed in battle. This is where things get interesting. The crew of the Amity, seemingly upset over missing the Pilgrim fleet and losing their captain, must have been jealous of the fine goods bought by the Susanna. So, Baldridge appears to have given them the course of the charming Mary, because the Amity cast off and captured her. They then changed ships with Captain Glover, elected a new commander, and sailed to the Indies. Apparently they were captured by the Mughals. Glover carried the Amity back to the Americas. The next year, Glover returned aboard the Amity, the owners of the Mary having refitted her into a brigantine. Baldridge bought some of their goods, but whilst lying in the harbor, the Amity was attacked by Dirk Shivers, who plundered her casks, sails, rigging and masts, leaving the Amity but a floating hull adrift on a reef. Shivers was now in command of the Resolution, a pirate ship previously commanded by a man also named Glover, Robert instead of Richard, no relation. When Robert had refused to carry the men into the Red Sea, Shivers had mutinied. Now he offered Robert his old captaincy if he'd change his mind, but Robert refused, so Shivers and the gang left without him. Richard's fate is uncertain. Baldridge was watching all of this from the comfort of his fort, no doubt rubbing his hands and giggling like a goblin. For all of the good and fresh food, alcohol and company of women, Madagascar could not be considered anything but a hellscape. Disease flourished, and mortality rates were incredibly high. When you read the first-hand accounts, deaths from disease are so common as to be but a side note, a triviality. There was no air conditioning. Few Europeans would have been able to handle the weather alone, let alone the swarms of insects and their malaria, or dying from flux or dysentery after drinking bad water. It is easy to romanticize this period of piracy owing to the beautiful tropical weather, but owing to the extreme brutality and rampant diseases, it was more like a Hieronymus Bosch painting, come alive. In 1697, Baldridge had gotten tired of the sedentary life and decided to buy shares in a brigantine from Boston. Having careened her, he took her on a trading trip to several other points at Madagascar. About a week after his departure, the Malagasy rose up and killed 30 of the pirates on St. Mary, looting Baldridge's possessions. So, why did they rise up against Baldridge? According to him, it was his men that had abused and stolen cattle from the Malagasy. A reliable source, I'm sure. According to Captain Kidd, who arrived the next year, Baldridge had tricked several of his Malagasy allies aboard his ship and forced them into slavery. Kidd had learned this from the survivors. No doubt, both parties had an interest in telling their side of the story, so the truth remains uncertain. Baldridge returned to New York, where he approached the governor with the idea of founding a colony on St. Mary, but they did not trust him, understandably so. His ultimate fate is uncertain. Some allege that he illegally married the wife of a dead pirate and died himself in his 70s. Others that he managed to get a trading license but became a pirate instead. It wasn't long before pirates had re-established themselves on St. Mary, led by a New Englander named Edward Welch. Known to the Malagasy as Little King, owing to his height. He lived in a fortified hilltop compound, 4 miles from the main harbor. Visitors had to creep up a single zigzag path and cross through stone walls, fortified with cannons. Inside was a trading post, tavern and whorehouse, all combined into one. The interior was furnished with Eastern plunder, Silver teapots, Persian carpets, and striped silk hanging in the windows. Welch bought and sold plunder, provided women and liquor, and even Malagasy mercenaries. Here he treated pirates like Robert Culliford and William Kidd, two rivals which Welch played against each other. He stored Captain Kidd's treasure chest, but allowed Culliford's men to ransack it. He likewise bought some of Kidd's stolen textiles from his mutineers. However, Welch did not only trade with Europeans. By 1697, Arab traders from Mombasa and Zanzibar had begun to frequent St. Mary, looking to buy pirate plunder at cheap rates. It's unknown if Baldridge ever traded with them. The success of the St. Mary colony has been debated upon. Some say it prospered under Baldridge, others under Welch. Some say it didn't really prosper at all. In 1691, Phillips wrote a letter to Baldridge, complaining that the 34 slaves he received were quite useless, 15 being children and 3 still suckling babes. For slave trading, independent action directly between interlopers and Malagasy appears to have been more efficient, but also more dangerous and challenging. Of course, trading at St. Mary never guaranteed your safety. Just look at the unfortunate incidents of Captain Richard Glover. Fool him once, shame on him. Fool him twice, maybe he should have learned the first time. The Madagascar pirates were now becoming a problem for England, where inflated traveler stories portrayed Madagascar as some sort of paradise where Henry Everard, a famous pirate, had established an independent republic. It was said that 1,500 pirates lived on St. Mary, in a castle of 50 cannon, with a fleet of 17 ships, 7 of which were large and armed with more than 24 guns. It was a gross exaggeration. At its height, 300 pirates at most inhabited St. Mary. Baldridge's fort never carried more cannon than a dozen, and the ships in the harbor never seemed to have counted above 5 or 6, most of them sloops or brigantines. The legend was in large part perpetuated by the East India Company, who saw the piratical merchants of Madagascar as a threat to their trade monopoly. They managed to muster the support of a certain Commodore Warren, who set out with a fleet to end the pirate kingdom. He ended up on the wrong side of Madagascar and never even saw a pirate. Instead, his nephew, only sailing in a small pink, managed to reach St. Mary. However, his intention was to grant pardons and purchase slaves. He wanted to trade with the pirates. Welch had been wounded in a skirmish and retired as an advisor at the court of a Sakalava king. Culliford had taken over in his stead, and he and 14 colleagues were glad to accept the pardon. A handful were absent or flat out refused. When Warren himself finally arrived in 1699, the pirates constructed earthwork batteries and blocked the harbor by sinking several of their ships. These included infamous vessels like the Mocha frigate and Soldado. All other ships and all of their plunder was burned. The pirates wanted to deprive the enemy of prize and profit. But to their surprise, Warren didn't even want to fight. He only wanted to extend the Act of Grace once more. Some of the pirates accepted it, others believed it to be a ruse and fled inland. One of those who escaped was a Dutchman named John Pro. Though most of his life remains mysterious and undocumented, he appears to have been running the outpost on St. Mary between 1700 and 1719. There is scarce documentation of his transactions, and he appears to have shifted between sailing and landlubbery, depending on the circumstance. At one point he was captured by the Navy, escaped, and became a pirate, before eventually settling down on St. Mary again. Most of his story was related through the unreliable A General History of the Pirates, but his existence has been confirmed through several first-hand accounts. Most important is the journal of Robert Drury, who met John Pro and visited St. Mary in 1717. It says the following: "By this time came in 2 white men abreast, making a formidable and hostile appearance. One was a Dutchman named John Pro, who spoke good English. He was dressed in a short coat with broad plate buttons, and other things agreeable, but without shoes or stockings. In his sash stuck a brace of pistols, and one in his hand. Pro took Drury to St. Mary's Island, where he and his companions were mediating slave trade between the local king and Europeans. The settlement on St. Mary was described as follows. John Pro lived in a very handsome manner. His house was furnished with pewter dishes, etc., a standing bed with curtains, and other things of that nature except chairs. But a chest or two served for that use well enough. He had one house on purpose for his cook room and cook slaves' lodging, storehouse and summer house, all of these enclosed in a palisade, as the great men's houses are in this country. For he was rich, had many cattle and slaves. The fate of John Pro is uncertain. He was reported dead in 1719. In the late 17th century, the Caribbean buccaneers departed their old hunting grounds when they became too hot, finding refuge in Madagascar and the Indian Ocean. History repeated itself in 1718, when the pirate nest of Nassau, New Providence, was squashed by a British expedition. Some of the pirates signed the royal pardon, others stuck around and got killed, and others decided to make a repeat of the old pirate round. They were largely inspired by legends of their predecessors, primarily that of Henry Everard and his purported Madagascar kingdom. In fact, the Nassau pirates had often referred to their Bahamian colony as the Second Madagascar. Time was nigh to check out the real thing. Most prominent of the new Roundsmen was the fleet headed by Jeremiah Coughlin, Edward England, and Olivier Levasseur. After crossing the Cape of Good Hope, the ships parted ways, with Coughlin headed for St. Mary. They arrived in 1720, and although John Pro had perished, the island was still inhabited by old and retired pirates, who had intermingled and married with the local community, forming a sort of hybrid pirate Malagasy culture. We do not know who, if anyone, was in charge. It might have been Jasper Seeger, one of the most mysterious figures of this period. Some historians have concluded that, since he does not appear in any documents before the fleet's arrival to St. Mary, and is shortly after given command of his own ship by them, he was a part of the old generation. A man named Thomas Seeger was part of Henry Every's crew. Perhaps Jasper was a brother. Certainly then he would have been revered and respected by this new generation. Coughlin died of disease almost as soon as he stepped foot on St. Mary. What a surprise. And command of his ship was given to Richard Taylor, known for his reckless episodes. Sailing north, the pirates rescued a shipwrecked Olivier Levasseur before going on a rampage across the Indian Ocean. It culminated in the capture of a Portuguese treasure ship, the Nossa Senhora do Cabo, said to be the richest prize in all of history. Credit of the victory was given to Jasper Seeger, who had replaced Edward England as captain after he was deposed. England was marooned and escaped to St. Mary, where he retired and lived on the charity of generous pirates. The victors carried the Cabo to St. Mary, where they prepared to have her refitted into a pirate flagship, the largest ever known, since she was able to carry as many as 70 guns. For 10 months they partied on the island, recklessly spending their loot. Well, all except Jasper Seeger, who, you guessed it, died of disease. He was replaced by Richard Taylor, who had previously been deposed for his hot temperament. He renamed the Cabo to Defense and also claimed sole credit for capturing her. The festivities abruptly ended when news arrived of a Navy fleet sent to capture them, led by Commodore Matthews. Both Levasseur and Taylor decided to leg it, leaving behind much of their plunder. Silk, china, everything just lying exposed on the beach line. When Matthews arrived, he wasn't actually looking to fight the pirates, but pardon and trade with them. He interacted politely with the settled ones like Edward England and John Plantain, but both of them refused to give the pirates whereabouts. It might have been specifically because the Navy didn't want to hurt them, only trade. England and Plantain both hated Taylor and Levasseur for having betrayed them. As for Matthews, his methods might seem like corruption, but he wasn't really concerned with the Christian pirates as much as the Hindu pirates led by Kanoji Angria, commanding 11 ships and some 1,500 men. Taylor and his company were small potatoes in comparison. The capture of the Cabo was the last great act of piracy carried out from St. Mary's Bay. Some of the pirates continued to live there like minor princes, owning legions of slaves and vast harems. They fought in local conflicts, carving out petty kingdoms. After wrecking the defense of Madagascar's northern tip, Levasseur became one of them, specializing in trading slaves. His independent commercial success roused the anger of the nearby colony of Bourbon, who were looking to monopolize slavery and migrate the pirates over to their island. Levasseur refused, eventually leading to his capture and execution. Legend says that Levasseur was buried in the pirate cemetery on St. Mary, where the headstones are marked by the iconic skulls and bones. The graveyard was not constructed until 1788, 58 years after his death. Besides the unlikely fact that he, executed on a fairly distant island, would have washed ashore on St. Mary after being cast to the sea. Who knows? If you want to learn about other pirate bases outside of the Caribbean, or want to learn more about Madagascar, please give this video a like and tell me in the comments. Until those videos come out, you might be interested in this episode, covering the pirate nest of Jamaica. All of these episodes talk about pretty dark topics in a frank manner, which puts me at risk of being shadow banned or demonetized. To ensure that I can continue producing these videos, you can support me by becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter, or making a one-time donation by PayPal. Paid supporters can also watch the videos without ads. Enjoy.